BRICS emergency meeting. Now things are really heating up and events are escalating. China, Russia, and so on. The BRICS nations are now coming together here for a mega summit. This whole thing has massive implications for the financial markets and Bitcoin. Just a few minutes ago, China even issued a warning to the USA, saying that the US sanctions are illegal and unjustifiable. Massive. This could now bring massive turmoil to the markets. The whole thing is a direct response to Donald Trump, who is now raising tariffs again and causing new chaos. Bitcoin is still under pressure here. We have China, who now want to launch their own stablecoin, according to the Financial Times. That means we're not just seeing Bitcoin Nation FOMO, but we're also seeing Stablecoin Nation FOMO, with both sides playing out the game theory to the fullest. All of this also has massive long-term effects on the Bitcoin price. At the same time, there are signs of a peace agreement between Putin and Trump. But all of this is overshadowed by the chaos currently in the market. And we have the latest massive price prediction from Fred Krueger. This is what Michael Saylor says. Will Bitcoin shoot up to $250,000 on its own? We're going to take a look at all of this. But first, let's smash the like button down below for higher Bitcoin prices, for the Valhalla bomb, for the epic Bitcoin La Bubu pump. Fred Krueger also says it here, 25 basis points September rate cuts, now with a probability of 95%. And that's exactly what many people expect, that the market will turn at the latest by then. Right now, there's still a lot of pressure in the market. We're going to take a look at all of this as well. At any moment now, literally any second, we could see another pullback here. There could be volatility at any second because there's just so much uncertainty in the market right now. But starting in September, the Federal Reserve could bring some stability back to the markets. And the more things escalate right now, the higher the likelihood that the Fed will step in. Here's another really interesting connection that Fred Krueger has discovered. Gold and stocks have moved more or less in sync over the past 50 years. Neither of these assets is clearly superior. Bitcoin, in both cases, Bitcoin is clearly superior to both in its 15-year price history. So if we take a look at this, here we just see gold and the S&P 500, but Bitcoin, of course, pulls away much more sharply. So Bitcoin isn't actually shown here, but we know that Bitcoin really stands out because people often say things like, yeah, Bitcoin just follows the S&P 500, and so on. And then we actually have the big story here. China is now allowing the introduction of the first renminbi stablecoins. This is coming from the Financial Times and is, of course, very interesting. We know that the US is heavily focused on stablecoins, that the US really wants to be the frontrunner in stablecoins if they want to maintain the strength of the US dollar. And now it seems that China has something similar in mind. And Donald Trump always says, hey, we have to watch out for China here, so they don't overtake us when it comes to digital assets. We're talking about Bitcoin, we're talking about stablecoins, we're talking about the whole crypto story. And it looks like China is now responding. Does China have a chance to keep up here? No, definitely not. Stablecoins are more or less a winner-takes-all story. Probably one or two stablecoins will prevail, or maybe it won't turn out that way. But I do assume that most stablecoins will be traded in dollars because that's where the greatest demand is, since it's the largest currency area. And then there will probably be one or two leading stablecoins that will establish themselves, maybe even more than that. And here we have the next race. Satsuma is now buying 1,126 Bitcoin here. Another company here in the UK that is making a massive bet on Bitcoin. Mark Mose, among others, is also involved here. That means this could become the next big company after Smart Web Company here in the UK to make a massive move into Bitcoin. And that was one story, and now all the uncertainty is coming into the market. That means we now have Donald Trump, who assumes or says that the reciprocal tariffs are finally coming into effect here. Yesterday, he even said, hey, billions will flow into the country, and all of this will happen by midnight at the latest or something like that. That's now over. So now the tariffs are in effect, and there wasn't really any major setback. I could have imagined that maybe something else would happen or something like that. Then Donald Trump made a few very interesting announcements. He says that Apple will invest another $100 billion in the USA. Total investments for Apple under Trump, $600 billion in 4 years. And then there were also these stories that Donald Trump is now raising tariffs on India to 50%. I already reported on that yesterday. Here, Japan gets another 15% tariff, and here 100% tariffs on semiconductors, or rather chips. Here, pharmaceutical tariffs 250%. And now there's also the clear question of whether the trade agreements have been stopped, because now there are some drastic countermeasures from the BRICS nations, who have actually arranged an emergency meeting. We can see that here as well. China, India, and Brazil are meeting here to issue a BRICS response to President Trump's tariffs. I don't know if there are other BRICS countries involved as well. I think I also mentioned Russia earlier. Here, the president of Brazil explicitly states that they will formulate a joint and unified response to the USA, thus a truly combined and coordinated response. I just don't know which countries are all involved. They're basically taking a stand against Donald Trump's actions, saying that it's not acceptable, that it just creates more division instead of bringing people together, to sum it up roughly. Here he mentions again that they will meet together at the BRICS summit. Xi Jinping will be there, as well as other leaders. So it's possible that other BRICS nations will be involved as well. They would then discuss everything together and make a joint decision on how to deal with the whole situation. I've already mentioned this in the last video. In the past, when the US put pressure on other countries, it often didn't benefit the US, but instead led to other countries coming together even more. The BRICS countries are coming together more closely and are even considering their own currency basket, their own payment system, their own monetary system. By now, there are all these parallel monetary systems. Russia is also now running tests with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to see if international settlements can be handled with all this stuff and so on. And now there's this emergency meeting and everything. All of this is contributing to the fact that the Bitcoin price remains under pressure and will probably have a hard time breaking out massively as long as this uncertainty is present in the market. There was also some bullish news here. In the long term, it's super bullish anyway. There was also that meeting between Trump and Putin where they're ready to meet next week, or actually, that's not quite right. Here's a picture of the meeting between the two, showing whether they're ready to meet next week. And then after that, a meeting between Putin and Zelensky is supposed to take place, and possibly, peace negotiations could happen, or maybe even the war could come to an end. And that was once again a good sign for the markets. That would be really, really good again. It would bring security back to the market. That would bring more risk capital into the market, because that's always what I tell you. When times are uncertain, a lot of investors stay on the sidelines. Investors always wait until things get better here, until times improve a bit, until there's more certainty. And then that's when the money flows back into the market. And there was also a very, very interesting assessment from Fred Krueger, who talked about how massive amounts of money could flow into the market, how money can come into the market, and why, in particular, Saylor and MicroStrategy alone could push the Bitcoin price up to $250,000. He makes a statement here and says that this is currently the most important metric for Bitcoin. And this is about the STRC price being $97. And it's supposed to settle at around $100 here. All the critics who said that it wouldn't settle at $100 have already been proven wrong, because just a few days ago, the price was much, much lower, and now it's more or less stabilizing at $100, basically becoming a kind of stable coin. And here he writes, "Hey guys, at a price of $97, Saylor can borrow at an effective yield of 9.3%. MicroStrategy is basically saying, let's build a yield-generating asset that feels like a stablecoin backed by Bitcoin, but is traded on the market like a bond or a preferred stock. And we will adjust the dividends monthly to anchor its price. I assume that strategy could sell up to 50 billion of these in the next 5 months. Compare that to the 46 billion that has ever been spent on Bitcoin with ETFs in 21. Here he's probably referring to 21 by Jack Millers. Could we reach 100 billion in new money by the end of the year? That should get us to $250,000. So still this year, that means you just have to imagine. Even more money than Michael Saylor has put into Bitcoin purchases so far. Analyst Fred Krueger suspects that this amount could come in just through the STRC vehicle. That's exactly what Michael Saylor called the iPhone moment during his earnings call. If you're simply ready now to build such a vehicle, and how interesting is that? How attractive is that? I've already talked to a lot of people about this, who are now considering just putting their cash reserves into STRC. You get almost 10% there, and in a savings account, you get pretty much nothing. And it almost feels like this is maybe even better or safer than a savings account, because with a savings account, it's not really your money. It belongs to the bank. And here, at least in the form of a security, you have a claim to it. I think the property rights are definitely better here, and it's probably also better secured, simply because it's over-collateralized with Bitcoin. If there's a small banking crash now, okay, then the regional bank goes under, but there's deposit insurance up to $100,000, so you're safe here. But if there's a global banking crash or an overlapping massive banking crash, then deposit insurance doesn't really help you much here either. And then with STRC, you might not only be better off in terms of returns, but also better protected against risks, because that's obviously a very, very major factor. That means if MicroStrategy were to go bankrupt, I believe this is the second highest in the liquidation cascade. I think STRK would still be above that. Correct me if I'm wrong. STRK and STRF, I always mix those two up. One of them should still be above that. And then we see the $250,000 still this year, And he's also talking about 21. That's from Cantor Fitzgerald, from SoftBank, and from Jack Mellors here, the new company that also wants to accumulate massive amounts of Bitcoin. And yeah, maybe it's not even that exaggerated, but at the moment it just doesn't look like it, because right now things are still moving very, very slowly, very sluggishly. But we've always seen it, and that's also what I always tell you, hey, Bitcoin always moves in very, very cyclical patterns and sometimes very abruptly. That means right now we really have times when nothing at all is happening. We literally fall asleep during those times. That's when people disappear again, they go back to doing other things. YouTube and stuff just doesn't interest them then. And then there are a few days, a few weeks where things just go absolutely crazy, like a cannon going off. One thing after another happens, this, that, the other. You can't even keep up with making news at that point. Then there are so many news stories. Even now, with everything that's happening here, things are really piling up, but not when it comes to prices. I mean, globally, a lot is happening. But in terms of prices, things haven't gone crazy here yet. And when all these things come together, maybe there's a bit less turmoil, a Fed rate cut. Then we have Saylor's massive purchases, then the ETFs, and then other companies joining in as well. I think there are also a few big investments planned for Q3 and Q4. Major announcements from companies getting into Bitcoin, too. If all of that comes together, then high Bitcoin prices aren't utopian anymore. They really just become the base case. But feel free to write your thoughts in the comments below. I'm still very bullish for this year. If you want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link to 21 Bitcoin below for you. You can easily and securely buy Bitcoin there. With the code BitcoinHotel, you can get up to 20% off fees when buying Bitcoin. Guys, see you soon. Until then.